Mira had always known that she was different from other beings in the galaxy. While most creatures worried about survival and conquest, she spent her days walking through ancient forests that had existed since before the first stars learned to shine. Her violet eyes could see things that others missed. She could feel the pulse of life in every tree, every stone, every whisper of wind that moved through the valleys of her world. The Dragon Realm was not a place that appeared on any map. It existed in a fold between dimensions, a world where magic still lived and breathed. Here time moved slowly, almost like water flowing through deep canyons. A single day in the Dragon Realm could feel like a week elsewhere. A year here felt like a mere moment to those who lived in the hurried outer galaxy. Mira was the guardian of this realm. Though she had never chosen the role, she had been born into it, emerging from a crystalline egg that had waited in the temple for 3,000 years. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw Aurora and Ember standing beside her. They were not young dragons then. They were already ancient, already wise, already waiting for the guardian they had always known would come. Her silver skin glowed softly in the moonlight as she walked through the forest paths each evening. The trees here were enormous, their trunks wider than human buildings, their leaves shimmering with colors that had no names in any language. Mira would place her hands against these ancient giants and listen to their stories. They told her about the creation of worlds, about the first dragons, about times when magic flowed through all existence like blood through veins. Aurora was the keeper of memories. Her scales held the history of every creature that had ever lived in the Dragon Realm. When Mira wanted to understand something, she would climb onto Aurora's back and fly through the starlit skies. The dragon would show her visions from the past, memories stored in her very being. Mira had learned about the formation of galaxies this way, about how dragons once protected all living things before most of the universe forgot that magic existed. Ember was different. Where Aurora held the weight of ancient knowledge, Ember carried pure joy and curiosity. The smaller dragon had a playful spirit that often made Mira laugh. He would race through the forests, his golden scales leaving trails of light that hung in the air like captured sunlight. He loved to surprise Mira by perching on her shoulders, unexpectedly, or by bringing her gifts of interesting stones and crystals he found in the deepest parts of the realm. The life Mira lived was peaceful but lonely. She spoke to her dragons and they understood her in ways that went beyond words. Sometimes they communicated through shared feelings, through images passed between their minds, through the deep connection that bound them together. But Mira often wondered what it would be like to speak with someone who was not a dragon, someone who could answer back with words, someone whose thoughts were not always connected to the ancient magic that surrounded this place. She created art to pass the time. She carved beautiful shapes from stone, painted pictures on cave walls, composed songs that the wind would carry through the valleys. Her creations were beautiful and sad in equal measure. Each piece held a longing for something she could not name. Each song contained a question that had no answer. The other guardians from distant worlds sometimes sent messages asking if Mira was content. She always told them yes, because it was partially true. She was content with her dragons and her forest. But contentment is not the same as happiness. Happiness requires connection with others, requires the possibility of being known and understood by someone new. Mira spent many nights standing on the highest cliff of her world, looking out at the distant stars. She wondered if anyone out there was looking back. She wondered if the vast emptiness of space was truly empty, or if it was filled with invisible threads connecting all living things together. Sometimes she would call out into the void, her voice carrying on winds that existed between dimensions, and she would wait to hear if anyone answered. Aurora always knew when Mira felt this sadness. The great dragon would come and wrap herself around the elf woman, her scales warm and comforting. Ember would join in, purring like a creature many times smaller than his true size. Together, the three of them would stand and watch the stars wheel across the sky, and Mira would feel less alone, though the longing never truly went away. One day, Mira noticed something unusual happening at the edges of her realm. The barrier between worlds was beginning to shimmer differently. Usually it was solid and impenetrable, designed to keep the Dragon Realm hidden from those who did not belong there. But now there were small disturbances, like someone was trying to communicate from the other side. Like someone was calling out and waiting for a response. Mira felt afraid and excited at the same time. In 3,000 years, no one had ever tried to reach into her world this way. The barrier had always been respected, feared even by the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Whoever or whatever was on the other side was not afraid. They were persistent and careful, not violent or demanding. They simply wanted to make contact. She told Aurora and Ember about the disturbances. The dragons became alert, their ancient senses awakening to possibilities they had not considered in millennia. Aurora advised patience. She told Mira that some things cannot be rushed, that timing was as important as intention. Ember, however, wanted to go immediately to the barrier and investigate. He urged Mira to be brave, to step forward and see who wanted to speak with them. Mira spent days meditating on what she should do. She sat in the deepest temple of her world, a place where ancient magic was strongest, and she asked the universe for guidance. She asked the stars and the winds and the stones beneath her feet if she should open the barrier even slightly. The answer came not as words but as a feeling. It was a warmth spreading through her chest, a sense that change was coming and that she should not fear it. So Mira made a decision that would alter everything about her existence. She would lower the barrier just for a moment. She would allow someone from the outside world to enter the dragon realm. She did not know why she felt so certain this was the right choice. She only knew that her heart was pulling her toward the unknown, and for the first time in 3,000 years, she was willing to follow that pull, even though she had no idea where it would lead. As she walked to the barrier and began to trace the ancient symbols that would weaken it, Mira felt her dragons moving beside her. They did not try to stop her. Instead, they seemed to understand that their guardian was ready for something new. Perhaps they too had been waiting for this moment. Perhaps they had known all along that one day, someone from the outside world would find their way to the edges of the dragon realm and that Mira would choose to let them through. The barrier began to glow with soft light. Mira could feel the presence on the other side more clearly now. It was a human, a single human who had been calling out for weeks, searching for her world, looking for the legendary dragon realm that every explorer dreamed of finding. Mira took a deep breath and opened the barrier completely. She did not know that this moment would change everything. She did not know that the lonely elf woman was about to meet someone who would make her understand what love truly meant. She only knew that her heart was racing with anticipation, and that she was finally ready to stop waiting for life to find her. She was ready to step forward and meet it face to face. Liam stepped through the barrier and immediately fell to his knees. The sensation of crossing between dimensions was overwhelming. His body felt like it was being torn apart and reassembled at the same time. Every nerve in his being screamed with the intensity of the experience. After several minutes, the feeling faded and his eyes cleared enough to see where he had arrived. He was standing in a forest that defied all logic. The trees were impossibly large, their trunks wider than the spacecraft he had traveled in. The air itself seemed to glow with a soft light that came from nowhere and everywhere at once. There were colors here that he had never seen before, shades and hues that his human eyes were struggling to process. Everything felt alive, as if the entire forest was one single consciousness watching him. Then he saw her. Mira stood beneath the tallest tree, her silver skin luminous in the strange light. Her violet eyes were wide with curiosity and something that looked like fear. She was the most beautiful thing Liam had ever seen, and he found himself unable to move or speak. He had spent weeks trying to find this world, had sacrificed his career and his reputation among human explorers to locate the dragon realm, and now that he was here, he could barely remember how to breathe. Aurora and Ember emerged from behind the trees, their massive forms casting long shadows across the ground. Liam's hand instinctively moved to the weapon at his side, but Mira made a soft sound that stopped him. It was not quite a word, but he understood its meaning. "Do not be afraid. We mean you no harm." Liam slowly removed his hand from his weapon and let it fall to his side. He stood up carefully, trying to appear calm even though his heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst from his chest. He had trained his entire life to be a soldier, to face danger with courage and steadiness, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. Nothing had prepared him for meeting Mira. She took a step forward and Liam took a step back. They circled each other slowly, each trying to understand what they were seeing. Liam saw an alien woman who looked more graceful and beautiful than any creature he had encountered in his travels. Mira saw a human man whose features were strange and compelling, whose presence seemed to create ripples of change in the air around him. Finally, Liam spoke. His voice came out rough and uncertain. He said his name was Liam and that he had come from the outer galaxy, traveling for months to find the Dragon Realm. He told Mira that he had read ancient texts about this place, had heard stories from travelers who claimed such a world existed, but who could never prove it. He said he had come because he believed in magic, because he refused to accept that the universe was empty of wonder. Mira listened to his words, and she realized that she could understand him. She had studied many languages in her 3,000 years of life. Though she rarely had opportunity to use them, she answered him in his own language, telling him her name and explaining that she was the guardian of this realm. She told him about Aurora and Ember, about how they had been waiting for thousands of years. She told him that she had felt something calling to her, that she had known someone would come eventually, though she had not known when or who. Liam listened with wonder growing in his expression. He told Mira about the battles he had fought, about the worlds he had explored, about how he had always felt that something was missing from his life. He described the sensation of searching for something he could not name, the feeling of being incomplete. He said that seeing her, seeing this world, was like suddenly finding the piece of himself that had been lost. They talked for hours as the strange light of the Dragon Realm remained constant, never changing into day or night. Liam told Mira about human culture, about art and music and literature. Mira told him about the ancient magic that flowed through her world. She showed him the trees and explained the stories they held. She introduced him to Aurora and Ember more formally, and watched as Liam slowly lost his fear and began to understand the intelligence and nobility of the dragons. Aurora allowed Liam to touch her scales. He ran his hands over the smooth, hard surface and felt memories flowing through him. For just a moment he experienced thousands of years of dragon history, understood things about the universe that human minds were rarely meant to comprehend. When Aurora pulled away, Liam fell to his knees again. But this time it was not from physical pain. It was from the overwhelming beauty of what he had just experienced. Ember, being more playful, decided to test Liam by flying just above his head, forcing him to duck and laugh. The sound of his laughter echoed through the forest, and Mira realized that she had never heard a human laugh before. It was a sound like bells ringing, full of genuine joy and delight. She found herself laughing as well, and the two of them seemed to create a kind of music together, a harmony that neither had expected to find. As the hours continued to pass, Liam and Mira moved through the forest together. She showed him the ancient temples where she meditated, the crystal caves where water fell upward instead of downward, the places where magic was strongest. Liam touched everything, asked countless questions, wanted to understand and remember every detail. He told Mira that if he had to leave this world tomorrow, he wanted to carry every moment with him. But Mira did not want him to leave. She realized this with a sudden clarity that surprised her. In just a few hours, this human had become important to her in ways she could not fully explain. She told him this honestly, and Liam's expression softened. He said that he did not want to leave either, that he would find a way to stay as long as possible. That night they sat together on a high cliff overlooking the Dragon Realm. Aurora and Ember rested nearby, their presence comforting and protective. Liam and Mira watched the stars together, and Liam explained what was happening in the outer galaxy. He told her about the intergalactic council that ruled human space, about the laws against relationships between different species, about the prejudices that existed throughout the galaxy. Mira listened and felt sadness beginning to creep into her heart. She had known that bringing someone into her world would be complicated, but hearing Liam speak about the laws and prejudices made it feel suddenly real. She asked him if he thought they could ever truly be together, knowing all the obstacles that stood in their way. Liam took her hand carefully, as if she might break if he held too tightly. He said that he did not know what the future held, but that he knew with absolute certainty that meeting her was the most important thing that had ever happened to him. He said he would fight for her, would do everything in his power to find a way to make their connection work. He promised that he would not abandon her, that distance and difficulty meant nothing when compared to what he felt in his heart. Mira believed him in that moment. She let herself hope that perhaps the lonely life she had lived for 3,000 years was about to change forever. She did not know then that this hope would be tested in ways she could never imagine. She only knew that for the first time, she was not alone, and that made all the difference. Liam stayed in the Dragon Realm for what he believed was only 3 weeks. When he finally managed to escape back to his spacecraft using the barrier opening, he was shocked to discover that 6 months had passed in the outer galaxy. Mira had tried to warn him about the time differences between worlds, but he had not truly understood until he saw his ship's logs. He realized that he would have to return to human space immediately. His superiors would be searching for him by now. They might already believe he was dead. But before he left, he and Mira made a promise to each other. Liam said he would find a way to come back. He told her that he would request extended leave, would find reasons to return to this sector of space. He said that even if it took years, he would make their connection work. Mira held him close, and her violet eyes filled with tears of crystal that fell like precious gems to the ground. Liam returned to his position in the Galactic Fleet, and he kept his promise. Over the next several years, he found ways to return to Mira's world as often as possible. Sometimes he could manage a visit every few months. Other times he had to stay away for longer periods due to military obligations and political complications. But each time he returned, Mira was waiting for him at the barrier. Their love grew stronger with every meeting. Liam taught Mira about human emotions in ways that went beyond words. He showed her the fragility of human bodies and the strength of human hearts. He played music from his world, and Mira learned that humans had created art forms that were every bit as beautiful as the ancient magic of her realm. He brought books and holographic records, showing her human history in all its complexity. He taught her about human love through stories and songs and the gentle way he held her hand. Mira showed Liam depths of meaning he had never considered before. She taught him to listen to the voices of nature, to understand that magic was not about power but about connection and awareness. She introduced him to forms of consciousness that were impossible for humans to achieve normally. When she meditated with him, he could briefly touch the edge of understanding that came from living for thousands of years. She showed him beauty in simplicity, joy in stillness, strength in gentleness. Aurora observed their growing connection with ancient wisdom. The great dragon understood that this was a bond that transcended the normal boundaries of species and world. She began to offer Liam the gift of her memories more frequently, helping him to expand his consciousness so he could understand Mira more deeply. Through Aurora's gift, Liam experienced centuries of dragon history, witnessed the creation of worlds, understood the fundamental forces that held the universe together. Ember seemed to approve of the relationship as well. The playful dragon began to include Liam in his games and adventures. One day, Ember did something that no dragon had done for anyone outside the realm in recorded history. He allowed Liam to ride on his back while flying through the sky. Liam soared above the forests and valleys, seeing the dragon realm from a perspective that few humans had ever achieved. He felt the wind rushing past him and understood why dragons loved to fly. He understood that for a creature with wings, the sky was home in a way that earthbound beings could never fully comprehend. As years passed and their visits continued, Liam and Mira grew more deeply connected. They spoke about a future together, about finding a way to bridge the gap between their worlds. Liam told Mira that humanity was changing. He said that more and more humans were beginning to question the old laws against relationships with other species. He believed that one day, perhaps soon, those laws would be challenged and changed. Mira wanted to believe him, but she had lived for 3,000 years and had seen many civilizations rise and fall. She knew that change came slowly to societies built on fear and prejudice. She asked Liam if he would be willing to wait, if his love for her would survive the slow passage of time and distance. Liam answered by bringing her gifts from his world. He brought human flowers that bloomed in different colors each day. He brought music recorded by the greatest human composers. He brought jewelry crafted by human artisans, each piece unique and beautiful. Most importantly, he brought photographs of himself so that when they were apart, Mira could see his face and remember that their connection was real. Mira created art for Liam as well. She carved intricate sculptures from crystal that held the essence of her feelings for him. She painted murals on the walls of the temples, depicting their meetings and their growing love. She composed songs that mixed the sounds of the dragon realm with melodies that would be familiar to human ears. She poured all of her emotion into these creations, making them gifts that could convey what words sometimes could not. On one particularly memorable visit, Liam brought something extraordinary. It was a device created by the most advanced human scientists, a technology that allowed him to record his thoughts and feelings directly into a crystal matrix. He gave it to Mira and told her that whenever she missed him during their time apart, she could activate the crystal and experience his emotions directly. His love for her was stored in that crystal, made tangible and unchanging. Mira wept when she held the crystal. She had never owned anything so precious, anything that demonstrated so clearly how much Liam valued their connection. She immediately created a matching crystal for him, filled with her own emotions, her own promises that she would wait for him no matter how long it took. But the universe seemed determined to test the strength of their love. The Galactic Council began to suspect that Liam was visiting somewhere he should not be. They questioned him about his frequent disappearances. They accused him of smuggling technology and secrets to alien worlds. They threatened to revoke his position if he did not cease his mysterious trips into unexplored space. Liam realized that he was running out of time. He could not continue his visits much longer without drawing serious attention. The council was becoming suspicious, and they had the power to imprison him or worse, if they discovered the truth about the Dragon Realm. One day, he arrived at the barrier and told Mira that he had made a terrible decision. He had chosen his people over her. He explained that he had volunteered for a deep space exploration mission that would take him far from this sector. The mission would last at least 5 years, possibly longer. By the time he returned, if he returned, the council's attention might have shifted elsewhere. He said he was doing this for them, to protect the Dragon Realm and to ensure their future could be a real future together. Mira felt her heart shatter as Liam spoke these words. She understood his reasoning, but understanding did not make it hurt any less. She held him tightly as he prepared to leave, and she made him promise something. She asked him to remember her, to carry the memory of their love forward through whatever challenges he faced. She asked him to fight his way back to her. Liam promised that he would. He said that nothing would stop him from returning to her. He said that across any distance, through any difficulty, his love for her would guide him home. They held each other as the barrier began to close, and then he was gone, leaving Mira alone with her dragons and her heartbreak. The first year without Liam was the hardest year of Mira's existence, and she had lived for 3,000 years. She had thought that after so many centuries she understood pain and loss. She had witnessed the deaths of countless creatures, had seen civilizations rise and fall, had felt the weight of eternal memory pressing down upon her consciousness, but nothing had prepared her for the pain of missing someone so deeply. She would go to the barrier each day, hoping that Liam would appear. Sometimes she would stand there for hours, reaching out her hand as if she could touch him through the invisible wall that separated their worlds. Aurora and Ember stayed close to her, sensing her despair. The dragons did not try to comfort her with words because they knew that words could not touch this kind of pain. Instead, they simply remained present, a constant reminder that she was not completely alone. Mira tried to continue her routine. She meditated in the temples, walked through the forests, studied the ancient texts that held the history of her people. But everything felt hollow and meaningless without Liam. The art she had once created with joy now felt like a burden. The songs she attempted to compose were too sad to complete. The sculptures she tried to carve would crumble in her hands as tears fell on the stone. She activated the crystal Liam had given her, the one filled with his recorded emotions. She held it close and experienced his love flowing through her, a sensation like warm light filling her chest. But experiencing his love only made his absence hurt more. She would activate the crystal for just a few moments each day, trying to ration the experience, knowing that eventually the crystal might fade or break, and then she would lose even this tenuous connection to him. Time moved differently in the Dragon Realm, which made the waiting worse in some ways and better in others. Days would pass that felt like years. She would experience the full cycle of emotions multiple times in what the outer galaxy would measure as a single week. Her immortal nature meant that she felt everything more intensely, more completely, because she had the depth of thousands of years of life experience to draw upon. The dragons began to worry about her. They noticed that Mira was spending less time eating, less time sleeping. She seemed to be fading, her silver skin becoming paler, her violet eyes growing duller. Ember tried to engage her with games and playful flights, but Mira's responses were automatic and joyless. Aurora tried to show her visions of hopeful futures, but all Mira could see were endless years of loneliness stretching ahead. In her darkest moments, Mira considered doing something she had never considered before in 3,000 years. She thought about lowering her star veil. The veil was the manifestation of her life force, the energy that kept her and her dragons bound to existence. If she released it, they would all fade into the void. They would stop existing, stop feeling pain, stop waiting for something that might never come. She thought about this option constantly. She would stand on the highest cliff of her world and imagine what it would feel like to simply let go. She imagined the relief that would come from no longer having to bear the weight of love and longing. She imagined her consciousness dissolving like mist at dawn, returning to the universal energy from which all things emerged. 5 years passed in the outer galaxy. Mira measured the time not in days or weeks, but in the number of times she had gone to the barrier and found nothing. She had lost count somewhere after the first 1,000 visits. The crystal Liam had given her was the only thing keeping her anchored to hope. When it seemed like the crystal was beginning to dim, Mira felt her last threads of resistance breaking. She decided that she would no longer wait. She would not continue to hope for a future that seemed increasingly impossible. She gathered her power, drawing upon the ancient magic that flowed through the dragon realm. She prepared to release her star veil to end the waiting, to end the pain. She climbed to her highest cliff one final time, and she began to trace the symbols that would allow her to let go of existence itself. Aurora cried out in anguish, a sound so loud and powerful that it shook the very mountains of the dragon realm. The great dragon had understood what Mira was attempting, and she moved immediately to protect her guardian. Aurora positioned herself between Mira and the cosmic energy above them, blocking her path to the void. Ember joined his companion, both dragons spreading their wings wide to shield Mira from her own despair. The dragons refused to let Mira release her veil. They circled her, their ancient voices singing a song that was both heartbreaking and determined. They were saying without words that they understood her pain, that they had watched her suffer, but that they would not let her give up. Their loyalty was absolute and unconditional. They had waited 3,000 years for Mira to come into existence, and they would wait forever if necessary. They would not abandon her simply because waiting had become difficult. Mira fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the love her dragons were showing her. She realized that in her despair, she had almost made a choice that would have destroyed not only herself but also two beings who depended on her completely. She understood that her pain, while real and valid, was not the only thing that mattered. Her dragons needed her. They loved her beyond reason or logic, and that love was worth living for. She took back the energy she had been gathering. She withdrew from the edge of release and pulled herself back into her body, back into existence. She held Aurora and Ember as tightly as she could, and she wept not from despair but from gratitude. Her dragons had saved her when she could not save herself. They had refused to accept her surrender, refused to let her give up. But even as she clung to her dragons, something deep inside Mira shifted. She understood that she could not continue to live like this, waiting for Liam, hoping against hope that he would return. She needed to find a way to live for herself, to discover meaning that did not depend on Liam's presence. She needed to remember that she was a being of ancient power and wisdom, that she had survived 3,000 years not because someone else loved her, but because she loved existence itself. She spent the next several years rebuilding herself. She threw herself into the study of ancient magic, learning secrets that had been hidden for millennia. She created art again, but this time for herself, not for Liam. She explored the deepest parts of her realm, discovering places that had been hidden even from her. She grew stronger, not because she was waiting for Liam anymore, but because she was becoming fully herself. And then, on a day that seemed like any other day, something changed. The barrier began to shimmer differently than it had in years. But this time, it was not just one presence calling from the other side. It was thousands. It was a force so powerful that the entire dragon realm seemed to vibrate with its energy. Mira felt the presence at the barrier before she consciously understood what it meant. Aurora and Ember sensed it too, and their entire demeanor changed. Where they had been somber for years, suddenly they became alert and excited. Aurora began to pace back and forth, her scales shimmering with colors Mira had not seen in ages. Ember danced through the air, his golden light intensifying as if he too remembered something from long before. Mira made her way to the barrier, her heart beginning to beat faster despite all her efforts to remain calm. She had learned not to hope too much over the years, had trained herself to expect disappointment, but as she approached the barrier she could feel something unmistakable. It was Liam. It was definitely Liam. But he was not alone. There were thousands of presences with him, all pushing against the barrier with peaceful but determined intent. She opened the barrier completely, not just a small crack but fully, allowing the dimensional wall to dissolve entirely. What she saw took her breath away. A human military vessel hung in space just beyond the barrier, but it was surrounded by hundreds of other ships from different worlds, different species, all bearing marks that indicated they were flying under a unified command. The vast fleet seemed to fill the entire sky, so large that it blocked out the stars themselves. Liam stepped through the barrier first, and Mira nearly collapsed at the sight of him. He had aged. There were lines in his face that had not been there before, gray in his dark hair. He had scars on his body, visible even beneath his uniform. But his eyes were the same, filled with the same warmth and love that had drawn her to him all those years ago. He crossed the distance between them in long strides and pulled her into his arms. Mira held him as if he might disappear if she loosened her grip even slightly. She could feel him trembling, could sense that he had been through ordeal and struggled to reach this moment. She asked him what had happened, how so much had changed. Liam held her face gently in his hands and told her their story. He explained that when he had completed his deep space exploration mission, he had returned to human space only to find that everything was different. Humans had begun to question the old laws. More and more humans had started to believe that the prejudices against other species were wrong and unjust. He had been able to speak publicly about Mira and the Dragon Realm, without fear of imprisonment. But speaking about Mira had changed everything. Liam described how his words had spread through human civilization like wildfire. He told Mira that his stories about her, about the ancient magic and the dragons, about the beauty of her world, had inspired a movement. Humans began demanding that their government negotiate with other species instead of oppressing them. Young humans wanted to explore and connect rather than conquer and destroy. The Galactic Council had tried to suppress the movement, but they found themselves outnumbered. Liam had not been the only one who loved someone from another world. There were thousands of humans and members of other species who had fallen in love across the boundaries that had separated them. Together, they had pushed for change, had demanded that the old laws be abolished, and they had succeeded. More importantly, Liam explained, his mission had brought him to the outer reaches of space where he had met representatives from other worlds who felt exactly as he did. They saw that the prejudices that kept species divided were preventing the entire galaxy from achieving its full potential. They believed that connection between different beings was not a threat but a gift, an opportunity to grow and learn from one another. These representatives had helped Liam gather a coalition. They had sent ships to escort him back to Mira's world, not as an invasion force but as witnesses and supporters. They had come to demonstrate that the galaxy was ready for change, that love between different species was not forbidden anymore but celebrated and honored. Mira felt tears streaming down her silver face. She asked Liam if what he was saying was true, if humanity had truly evolved to accept such connections. Liam nodded and took her hand, leading her to the edge of the barrier so she could see the assembled fleet more clearly. The ships began to transmit messages. Each one carried representatives from different worlds, different species, all united in a common purpose. They spoke of how Liam's actions had inspired change across the entire galaxy. They described the new laws that had been passed, the new understandings that had been reached. They spoke of a future where beings from different worlds could love freely, could build relationships and families, could work together to create a better galaxy. Aurora and Ember moved to stand beside Mira and Liam, and the dragon's presence seemed to amplify the moment. The sight of the ancient dragons standing peacefully alongside humans seemed to confirm for all those watching that change was not only possible, but inevitable and beautiful. One of the ships opened its doors and thousands of humans emerged. They did not come forward in a threatening manner. Instead, they simply stood at the edge of the barrier, showing their faces to Mira and to the dragons. They came from every part of human civilization. There were scientists and artists, soldiers and workers, children and elders. They had come to bear witness to this moment, to show their support for Liam and Mira, to demonstrate that humanity had changed. Liam took both of Mira's hands and told her something that made her entire being vibrate with emotion. He said that he had spent years fighting, not just for their love, but for the principle that love itself was the most powerful force in the galaxy. He said that he had nearly given up, had almost believed that their love was impossible. But then he had realized something crucial. Their love had never been impossible. It had only been forbidden by those who did not understand it. And now that the fear and prejudice had been stripped away, nothing stood between them anymore. Mira asked Liam if this meant they could be together, truly together, without hiding or fear. Liam answered by producing something from his pocket. It was a ring, crafted by the finest artisans from both human and elf worlds. It was made from a metal that combined human steel with crystalline material from Mira's realm. It was beautiful and strong, a perfect symbol of their unified love. He told Mira that if she would have him, he wanted to spend whatever time remained to them together. Whether that meant staying in the dragon realm or finding a way to exist between worlds, he wanted to build a life with her. He wanted to wake up each morning knowing that she was beside him. He wanted to learn from her and teach her, to grow old with her if that was possible for a being of her immortal nature. Mira said yes before he could finish speaking. She held out her hand, and Liam slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made specifically for this moment. The assembled witnesses erupted in celebration. The ship's lights blazed brightly, creating patterns of joy and hope across the sky. Aurora and Ember sang their ancient song, a sound that carried meanings of victory and renewal, of loneliness ending and connection beginning. The barrier that had separated the two worlds began to shimmer and change. It did not disappear entirely. Mira explained to Liam that some separation needed to remain to protect the dragon realm. But now it would be permeable, allowing those with permission to cross freely. The barrier had transformed from a wall of isolation into a doorway to possibility. Liam's people began to construct a settlement at the very edge of the barrier, a place where humans and elves and dragons could live in peace together. Over time, it grew into a beautiful city that honored both human and elf architecture, a place where different species worked together to create something neither could have built alone. Mira and Liam married in the ancient temples of the dragon realm, with Aurora and Ember standing as witnesses. The ceremony was attended by representatives from dozens of worlds, all celebrating what their union represented. Love had transcended species and distance. Love had changed the course of history. Love had proven to be stronger than fear and prejudice and law. As Mira stood beside Liam watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that had no names, she understood that the journey to this moment had been worth every moment of pain and loneliness. She realized that sometimes the greatest adventures were not about discovering new worlds or uncovering ancient secrets. Sometimes the greatest adventure was simply allowing yourself to love completely and being loved in return. Sometimes the greatest magic in the entire galaxy was the simple, powerful connection between two beings who had chosen to face everything together.